Humanity. We once roamed the dark corners of the earth as small, unintelligent primates just seeking some refuge from the dangerous world we found ourselves in. From these humble beginnings we spread, grew and thrived. We learned how to make tools from stone and shelter from wood. Eventually, we mastered fire, and from that point, our reign as the apex predators on earth began. We tilled the land, built farms and tamed animals. We were once the creatures that cowered in fear of Mother Nature, but now we bent her to our whims. From there we created ships, smelted iron and built kingdoms. Our influence grew from small isolated pockets to the entire world. It seemed we had reached our peak and that nothing more could be learned. Then the furnaces roared to life and a new era began. The era of man and machine. The industrial cogs turned, and with it brought humanity from serfdom and feudalism into a time of expansion and growth. We erected towers of steel and glass and became masters of the sky. Eventually, we even broke beyond that and ventured into the great unknown that is space. From small, terrified creatures at the mercy of nature, we used technology to fight and claw our way to global dominance. We stumbled along the way and definitely made mistakes, but ultimately, it seems that we won the fight against Mother Nature. Or have we? In this video, I want to look at a short story from Netflix's Love, Death and Robots called Good Hunting. It's a story about nature and magic, of man and machine. A story about man's hubris and man's genius. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me fill you in on the story and what really struck a chord with me when I first watched it. The story of Good Hunting is about a young Chinese boy during the cusp of British colonization. A time where nature and magic began to give way to man and machine. Our story begins with Liang and his father, a spirit hunter, on the hunt for a hulijing, a shape-shifting creature who supposedly takes the form of a beautiful woman and kills the men she bewitches. During the hunt, they manage to track the hulijing to her den in an effort to slay her. Liang happens upon the pup of the hulijing mother while they search the place for their prey. The pup explains that the hulijing do not hunt men and are instead cursed to always hear the voice of the man who has fallen for them. As such, they go to the man in order to quiet down their whining for the woman who has supposedly bewitched them. It's a brief exchange but helps to clarify that there is a fundamental misunderstanding between how humans see the creatures and how they see themselves. In this encounter, Liang's father slays the hulijing they were hunting, and Liang lies to cover up the fact that he found a pup. Years later, we find that Liang's father has passed and the world was changing. Trains now roared through the countryside and magic seemed to be waning from the world. Yan, the pup he had spoken to, never held her mother's death against him. She understood that sometimes the hunter became the hunted and thus formed a friendship with Liang. He comes to her to tell her that he has plans to leave the village. She confesses that she struggles to transform into her true form and that magic is growing weaker because of the machines and smoke that has infiltrated their world. Regardless, she would try to survive as best she could without Liang there. We jump forward again and Liang has traveled to Hong Kong, where he found he has a natural talent for working with machines. He ends up working with the trains as an engineer, and even though he's not sure if he's happy, he does find that he's really good at his job and finds fulfillment in it. One night, he bumps into Yan again as she's being accosted by men on the street. He chases them off and walks with her. She explains that she's completely lost her ability to transform and must now use her beauty to charm men in order to survive. They spend the night catching up, and she confesses that she still wishes she could transform and leap the tall buildings of the sprawling city as she once leapt the trees and mountains of the valley she had lived in. Years pass, and Liang has found that he has an even keener skill for working with automata than he had for steam engines. New technology has developed a lot in the city, and Liang has studied how to make the gears and machines bend to his will. In exploring this new technology, he has found a kind of magic in it as well and prides himself on his skill. Then, late one night, Jan returns and reveals to him that the governor had drugged her and completely replaced all her body parts with machinery. She is now essentially a brain in a mechanical body, all because of the governor's perverted attraction to machines. In retaliation, she killed the governor and went to Liang for help. She wants him to help her find a way to get back at the men who tried to control and take advantage of them. With his skill in automata, he forges her a new body, a body that can transform into her true form, a body she can use to hunt down men like the governor who would seek to control and oppress others, a body made of steel to fight back against the men with hearts of iron. I believe that Jan represents nature to an extent. She is a mystical creature trapped in human form and forced to debase herself in order to survive. The loss of her abilities are a direct result of industrialization and the technological transformation of the world. J.R.R. Tolkien also felt this, and it comes through in his writing. He saw a world that was changing from the magical England of his youth into the industrial powerhouse of his later years. Just as magic was leaving Middle-earth in The Lord of the Rings, so too was magic leaving the real world to be replaced by modernity. Liang and the governor both represent humanity, albeit two sides of humanity. To the governor, machines are a twisted form of pleasure and power that he could wield to control and oppress. He sought to subjugate and developed a carnal lust for metal and machines. He glutted himself on pleasure and sought nothing but what would bring him more and more power and euphoria. Liang, on the other hand, came from a world where nature and magic were to be respected and revered. He did not hate the machines and understood that the world was changing, but he also knew that there were drawbacks to letting one fall to the level of someone like the governor. Instead of a lustful infatuation with machines and progress, he found a healthy respect and even wonder for machinery and technology. He did not see technology as a way to oppress or control, but rather as a way to create and improve. And you can see how Yan, or nature, is being handled by both of these men. The governor, a representation of man's greed, lust and hunger for power, sought only to use Yan for pleasure. Liang, a representation of man's creativity, ambition and reverence for what technology is capable of, sought only to help Yan and ease her suffering. Man is capable of great creation and ingenuity, as well as great depravity and destruction. This story personifies the struggle between nature and technology, a struggle that we can even see in our own world. And while it's easy to become despondent and nihilistic about this, I believe that the story shows us that the future is a lot more hopeful than it may seem at first. It's easy to look at the current climate crisis hysteria that dominates modern culture to think that we've irreparably damaged the earth and that nature has lost in this battle against technology. I, personally, am not so black-pilled on the subject. I don't think we're anywhere close to a world where climate change causes mass amounts of death, but I do think we can do a lot better than we currently are in order to preserve the planet we have. Now, while I do have my disagreements with a lot of the climate hysteria, I'm not so blind as to say that there isn't an effect we've had on the environment. I do think that we, as humans, have treated Mother Nature very poorly, and I think it's important that we find ways to mitigate the damage we've done so far. Within reason, of course. It's always going to be a net positive if we can continue to provide the same level of living standards or better for everyone, whilst also minimizing our impact on the environment. I don't, however, think we should plunge people into poverty or worsen the living conditions to do this. We humans are a very ingenious bunch of monkeys. We've come up with innovative solutions to many problems in the world, and we continue to do so on a daily basis. And as long as we allow for an open marketplace of ideas and creativity, we will continue to do so. We will undoubtedly find ways to lower our impact on the environment whilst also lifting more and more people out of poverty. We will also undoubtedly find ways to help electricity-poor countries meet their power needs without poisoning the environment around us. Personally, I think nuclear might be the best solution, but it's up to the market to find the best solution to that. I'm not a huge fan of renewables like solar or wind due to the unreliability of a sunny or windy day, but I'm not opposed to it as long as people voluntarily adopt it to their energy grid. So, tying this all into our earlier discussion, nature and technology are, in many ways, at odds with one another. But funny enough, they also work heavily in tandem with one another. Nature inspires many technological advancements, and technology finds many ways to preserve and enrich the environment. In Good Hunting, Jan represented nature and was weakened by the intrusion of technology. Jan was exploited, defiled, and entirely enslaved to the men who sought to subjugate nature to their whims. She lost her magic and became a victim to the modern world. But what happened then? Liang used the magic of technology to empower her to take control once again and to restore what was lost to her. With Liang's help, she once again became empowered and found a new kind of magic that helped her act true to her nature. Just as Yan was once defiled and exploited, so too has Earth been defiled and exploited by humans. This can't really be denied, and even if you say that it was for noble intentions in the aim of uplifting people to modern living standards through freeing up natural resources, the impact on the Earth remains unchanged. We can't change the past, but we can, hopefully, find a better way forward. By taking a note from Liang's actions, we can look at restoring what once was. By using this magic we call technology, we can give nature her magic back. We can find ways to not only enrich humanity and uplift the poorest among us, but we can also help improve our environment and enrich the Earth at the same time. Will we make mistakes? For sure. Will we do things that seem to help at first, but end up causing more damage? Most likely. But none of this should discourage us. As I've said in the past, on an individual level, mistakes you make are the absolute best learning experiences for you as a person. This also applies on a societal level. It does take longer for us to recover from mistakes and get on the right path if you're talking about humanity as a whole, yes, but ultimately we still tend to correct our mistakes over time. Technology has hurt the planet, yes, but technology will, in all likelihood, be what ultimately saves the planet. And one more thing before we conclude my thoughts on the matter. I don't want this to be a political thing. I don't want people on the left proclaiming that humans are a blight on the earth and things would be better off without us, because I could easily deliver some scathing replies to that. And at the same time, I don't want people on the right proclaiming that everything is fine and that we should just discontinue efforts to seek alternative power sources, or even that climate change is a myth, because you will be just as soundly rebuffed. Protecting the earth we live on should be a non-political issue. Sure, we humans have caused damage, but if you think the earth would be better off without humans, then you're welcome to be the first to leave. Sure, a lot of the climate issue has been overblown and fossil fuels have definitely lifted entire nations out of poverty. But that doesn't mean we put our heads in the sand and rely purely on a definitionally finite resource. Please do come with your solutions regardless of what side you're on, because the only way to find the best solution is to pit the ideas against each other to find the best solution. So let's all come together, regardless of which side we align with, and find a way to make technology work with us to fix these problems. Unfortunately, there are some pitfalls we need to be aware of if we actually want to solve this problem. I'm actually quite inspired by the notion that we can use technology to help nature instead of just damaging it. But you want to know what will ensure we never come to a solution? What will actually, genuinely prevent us from solving this problem? Stubbornness and tribalism certainly wouldn't help, but that's not what I'm talking about. There is something that will absolutely hamstring our efforts for a solution in this area. I'm talking about, of course, top-down enforcement of policies in an attempt to fix the issue. This is a multifaceted problem that requires our best minds from all sectors of society and the political spectrum to put their best ideas forward in an effort to see which ideas come out on top. But if you have a government that comes from the top and says that solution X is the way and then enforce that solution by state mandate, you're going down the wrong path. If you outlaw or just disregard certain potential solutions in favor of one, then enforce that across the entire society, you're setting yourself up for failure. Let's say, hypothetically, the government heavily pushes a single solution, green renewable energy for example. And then, let's say, that they outlaw or heavily discourage other potential solutions like nuclear energy for example. They invest billions of your tax money into setting up solar farms, wind farms, and replacing combustion engine cars with electric ones. This may have a positive impact on the environment, yes, but what happens when you have a particularly cloudy year, or a year with low amounts of wind? What happens to all the electric cars when your only source of energy can't handle the strain on the grid? Are you willing to potentially plunge millions or billions of innocent people into poverty because you went ham on one solution to the exclusion of others? If this hypothetical situation plays out, then you'd be forced to go back to burning coal to make up the deficit. Right back to fossil fuels. And that's assuming you didn't decommission all your coal power plants. And if you don't have nuclear energy at the ready, then you couldn't even switch to that because it takes decades to get a nuclear power plant up and running. And I didn't even touch on the logistics of just finding the battery capacity to run society on renewable energy. Because, in case you weren't aware, as far as we found, there isn't enough lithium in the world to make enough batteries that could sustain a global population on renewables, let alone just enough to replace all the cars with electric vehicles. And that's ignoring the environmental damage caused by mining lithium, copper, silver, and other things you need to see this done. It's also ignoring the potential slave labor involved in doing this, since a lot of these resources are in the third world where slave labor is commonplace. As you can see, there's a plethora of factors to consider when we talk about a single solution like renewable energy. And while I'm not entirely against renewables, I don't think it's a good idea to have the state enforce it as the only solution, especially not if politicians can be bought or could own shares in the companies they'd employ in enforcing the solution. You think they're insisting on this change to renewables because they're good-hearted and just want to help. But that's until you dig deeper and see which politicians are paid by which lobby groups, or which politicians have family members or friends on the boards of these renewable energy companies, or just which politicians own shares in these companies. Wherever there's a financial incentive, many people will overlook any negative consequences because it could potentially hurt their wallets. What we need is for the market to decide. Maybe people like renewables and they voluntarily go for Tesla cars and solar panels. But if the renewable market becomes expensive because of a lack of requisite resources, or if people start boycotting renewables because of shady business practices in the third world, then people need to have the option to migrate to other alternatives. The open marketplace is there to facilitate these solutions. You need people who care heavily about environmentalism and people who care heavily about convenience and low prices, so that a solution can present itself that satisfies both sides. If you force a solution, you'll end up causing a lot more problems than you initially intended to. All of this being said though, I do believe that good hunting shows that all hope is not lost. We need to be like Liang and find technological solutions to the problems we've introduced in nature. We need to avoid being like the governor and enforcing a type of technological dominance over the voluntary will of the people and of nature. But I ultimately believe in the goodness of humanity as a whole, and that we will generally tend toward the right direction as long as we don't allow a select few psychopaths and sociopaths to enforce their will over our own. We will overcome these problems and we will find solutions that benefit as many people as possible. It'll take time and it will take effort, but the future is definitely bright. Don't let the troubles of the present make you see the future as hopeless. There's a lot more good in store for us than you may believe. Thank you very much for watching. Please consider liking the video, since that's the most impactful metric YouTube uses to gauge whether or not to recommend the video. And if you'd like to see more, consider hitting that subscribe button. Anyway, thank you for your time. Take care, and we'll talk again very soon.